Hi, I'm Jeff Lentz from Picasso Piano Academy. I want to tell you a few things about me that you probably don't know. I started playing piano when I was 8, and Sister Harriet was my teacher, and I knew after about my third lesson that this was going to be my life, that I was going to be a pianist. So basically piano picked me. I didn't pick piano, and I really didn't have any choice about it. I practiced 3 or 4 hours a day from the time I was third grade up until through college. And so it was my first love. And I've played with some of the world's greatest musicians. Some of them you heard of, most of them you haven't. I've played, by this time in my life, I've played almost every style of music you can think of. I've played jazz, rock, progressive rock, reggae, country, soul, funk, rhythm and blues. And then about 12 years ago, I started teaching. And I'll be honest with you, when I was young and when I was striving to make it as a musician, I always figured that teaching would be, a fallback position. And honestly, I've found that teaching is a very noble profession. And I get a lot from teaching. I really enjoy it. And it's very satisfying. I've helped a lot of people, become better musicians. One of the things I've realized as a teacher is that it's really my first and primary job not to teach you how to play a song. I could say, okay, student, play this. And then hopefully the student will play. Cool. So I just taught a student to do that. But I haven't taught the student how to do anything on their own if that's all I do. And what I've come to realize is that it's really my primary job as a teacher to teach you, the student, how to practice. Because most of the time I'm not there. And it's always best to have a one-on-one teacher that you can meet with regularly. Once a week is about the right amount of time. Because when a student is home practicing, even if they're doing things just the way I ask them to do, and they're practicing right and everything, they're going to come to me, and they might have made a few mistakes. They missed this note, they played the wrong note, so I correct that, and oops, your fingering isn't quite right, let's work on that. Your tempo's a little erratic, let's work on that. But a student needs to be able to know how to practice when a teacher isn't there. So I'm going to take a little bit of time today and tell you some of the stuff that I know now that I teach to my students so that they can practice effectively when I'm not there. So here's one of the things. When you're playing a section of music, a passage of music, and it's just not going well, the first thing you do is you just stop. You don't try and practice through music. Here's one thing that happens a lot to my students, my beginner and even my intermediate students. They're playing, this is difficult, I'm going to stumble and bumble through it and get to the other side of it. And then I can just see how it works for them when they're at home. And they go back and they play that same passage again because they want to practice and get ready for the lesson. So they get to that passage and they stumble through it and get to the other side. So over a week's worth of time, they've trained themselves how to play a certain passage of that song incorrectly. Now, okay, so I come in and say, hey, student, you're not doing it right. Let's work on this. But it would be better if they just knew what to do when they stumble. So here it is. Here's some of the things to do when you're stumbling. Let's say you're working on a page of music. Let's say the page of music is 16 bars. So you're stumbling and bumbling. The first thing to do, stop. And next thing you do is you slow down. And until that ritual of slowing down can become habit, you need a metronome. Now, here's full disclosure here. I don't use a metronome because I don't need to, because I'm to the point when I'm practicing a passage of music, and if it's not going well, I just naturally slow down. And I slow down again if I have to, and again until I find a tempo that I can play a section of music. Well, you know, I want my students to do that. So the first thing to do, if you're a student, you're stumbling, you stop. You don't keep on practicing it that way. You slow down, you start all over again at a slower tempo. Oops, another mistake, you slow down again until you find that tempo you can play it. So one way to chunk things down and break it down when you're in the practice room by yourself is just to stop and slow down and start all over. It's the 3 S's. By the way, I did a video on that. You can check it out on YouTube. But there's other things to do too. So let's say you're working on a 16 bar section of music. Well, you know, you might want to chunk it down to 8 bars, maybe 4 bars, maybe even 2 bars, and if you have to, just 1 bar. But I'd say it's better to master a smaller section of music and play it well and leave that practice session having at least accomplished mastering 2 measures with both hands, than it is to just kind of stumble through 16 measures. In the long run, you're going to get further because there's always tomorrow. If you mastered 2 measures today, then you can come back tomorrow and master the next 2 measures. In a week's time, you've mastered 16 measures. Other things you can do is to shorten your segment of music. And here's another thing you can do. Do one hand at a time. Master one hand at a time. Once you have that, master the other hand. Then try putting your hands together. Most likely what's going to happen when you get to that point, when you can play one hand in another hand and play it well, and you put your hands together, you're going to find that at that same tempo you've been practicing hands separately, it's too fast. So you slow it down. So you're constantly tweaking your practice session. You're going back and forth between, you know, slowing things down, shortening your segments, doing hand-separate practice. Then you try and put things back together again, and at some point you realize, well, you have to chunk it down again. So it's kind of like you're building up and tearing down and building up and tearing down until you get that page of music correct. Right? So one of the pieces I'm working on right now is the Chopin Ballade in G minor. And it's probably my favorite piano song. And I've never really played it. I've played a lot of classical music, but not this one. And before I die, I'd like to be able to have it concert ready. And, you know, I've had to practice what I preach. You know, there's sections of that song that are very difficult. And so for me, as a player, not as a teacher, but as someone who's trying to master this thing, I've got to know how to practice correctly. So here's a section of the music that is hard for me. And it goes like this. And I'm going to play it slow because I can't really play it well up to speed yet, but and it goes on and on, but that's difficult. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of leaps. That one moment right there, I find it very difficult to go from here to here. So I have to my first instinct is to slow down and maybe play it with the crab technique. Oops, I made a little blooper there. And maybe I might try it finger staccato at that speed. Now, finger staccato is difficult. If you can play something well finger staccato, you can definitely play it well up to speed. So I just slowed it down. I did a couple of technique exercises, one being the crab, which is like this. One is finger staccato. So now I think I'm going to go ahead and just try one hand at a time. I'm going to break it down even more. And I'm going to keep on doing finger staccato. Or maybe I'll do the crab one-handed. And so the theory is, once I can play it, my left hand isn't too hard. That's pretty easy. So it's the right hand that's a challenge at this part. But at some point, I'll try and put it back together again. Now, once I can do that 3, 4, 5 times in a row without any problems, I've kind of earned the right to see if I can play it a little bit faster. Cool. Now, if I can do that 3 or 4 or 5 times, maybe I can play it a little quicker yet. So that's the way it goes. You've got to be able to play whatever you're working on, however big the section is. You've got to be able to play it consistently at a consistent tempo quite a few times before you can start playing it faster. Okay? Now, here's just another aside about tempo, about the speed. Once you can play something up to speed, you don't want to always play it at that fast speed. Once you're almost concert ready and you can pretty much play a song up to speed, don't always play it at that fast tempo. Break it down and play it at different tempos. You develop a lot of bad habits. Once you get to that point where you've chunked everything down, you've slowed down, your hands separate, smaller sections. Once you get to that point, and then now you put it all back together and build it back up and you're playing fast again, that's great. But don't always play it at one tempo. If you really want to master a song, you've got to master it at different tempos. Okay? Don't always play. Like, here's a section of the same song. I can play it pretty fast. It's this section. I got to slow it down. Right? So, I practice this song every day. One day I might practice it like that. The next day I practice like this. I practice it with rhythms. This is a swung rhythm. Maybe I might reverse the swing now. Okay, so it's really important to develop good practice room habits. And when my students finally get this and understand the ways that you practice efficiently, then when they come to me, then I can do those little tweaks, those once-a-week tweaks where they might have gotten something wrong. Maybe they're not quite counting a passage right, the rhythm isn't right, or oops, they missed a couple of notes. They thought they had it right, but you should flat this note, or little stuff like that. And if they're practicing correctly, and then when they come to me, a qualified teacher, then I can help them and they can progress much faster. Now, if I'm working with a student and if I have to continually remind them, okay, stop, slow it down, okay, oh, it still isn't working, slow it down some more. Oh, it's still not working, let's really slow it down. Okay, let's try one hand at a time. Okay, let's shorten the section. Okay, let's just work on 2 measures, one hand at a time. Okay, you got that hand. Okay, you got that. Now let's put it back together. Oh, it's kind of difficult at that tempo with 2 hands. Let's slow it down. Once they do that on their own, and then they come to me, we can really rock it. We can really, really progress. It's a continual practice of breaking down and rebuilding. That's what constructive, correct practice is about. It's not just about trying to play it as something as fast as you can, and playing it, kind of sloppy. Another thing to remember is the metronome is your friend. Until you can achieve the discipline and the awareness to just instinctively stop and slow a section down when you're practicing it, and keep on slowing it down and keep on slowing it down if necessary. Until you get to that point, you need a metronome. Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next lesson. Okay, bye. I did it. See you, bye.